Sarah's 8-year-old daughter proudly handed her MIL a spelling bee certificate and said she wanted to show it to her first. Her MIL looked at it and said, "You think you can buy my love with that?" Then she tore it into pieces and dropped it in the trash. Sarah's older daughter stood up and said, "This," and the whole room went absolutely silent. Christmas at Sarah's in-laws' house always felt like stepping into a place where everyone was pretending nothing was wrong. Too bright, too cheerful, too stiff. The kind of atmosphere where one wrong move might crack the whole night open. Her 8-year-old Molly stayed close to her, clutching her spelling bee certificate like something precious she'd saved for exactly the right moment. And then, Molly stepped forward. She held that certificate with both hands, fingers gripping so tightly the edges curled. Her cheeks were flushed, not from the cold, but from pure excitement. She had been waiting all week for this. "Grandma," she said, small but bright, "I wanted to show you this first." Sarah's mother-in-law, Judith, took the paper between two fingers like she was accepting a parking ticket. Her face didn't move at first. One slow inhale through her nose, one slow exhale out of her mouth. Then her lips pressed together into that knife-thin line Sarah had learned to recognize as, "Judith is about to ruin the vibe just because she can." "You think you can buy my love with that?" Molly blinked. Sarah blinked. The room seemed to blink with them. And then, Judith ripped the certificate clean in half, then in half again, and again. Slow, deliberate, like she was doing intricate paper art with Molly's confidence. She let the shredded pieces fall straight into the trash can beside her chair without even looking down, like the entire moment bored her. Silence detonated. Sarah felt it in her teeth, in her spine, at the base of her skull. Molly stared at the trash. 1 second, confused. The next, her little face folded inward. Her mouth trembled. Her eyes went bright with that stubborn, frantic blinking kids do when they are trying not to cry in public. The room froze. Not loudly, not dramatically. Worse, quietly, like everyone had silently agreed to pretend nothing awful had just happened. Amanda, Sarah's sister-in-law, smoothed her dress and let a small, satisfied smile slip out, like this was exactly the outcome she'd hoped for. Riley, Amanda's daughter and Judith's favorite grandchild, watched with bright curiosity, almost pleased, as though Molly's humiliation was just a necessary reminder of how the family hierarchy worked. Leonard, Sarah's father-in-law, stared down at his hands, shrinking into his chair as if he could disappear into the upholstery. Jason, Sarah's husband, stood rigid beside her, pale and stunned, completely frozen. And no one said a word. Not one adult stepped in. Not one person asked Molly if she was okay. The quiet stretched out, thick and shameful. And then Tessa moved. Her chair scraped back, the sound slicing straight through the room. Sarah's 11-year-old stood up slow but steady, shoulders tense, eyes burning. She walked to Molly and planted herself between her sister and the trash can. Her voice shook, but it carried. "Why would you do that? She's 8. Good grandmas don't do that." Just like that, the silence turned into something alive, heavy, cold, impossible to ignore. Judith's eyes flew wide. She looked genuinely shocked that a child would dare confront her. "How dare you!" Judith snapped. But Tessa didn't flinch, not even a breath. "How dare you! You hurt my sister!" You could practically hear jaws dropping. Someone gasped softly. Someone else suddenly found the ceiling very interesting. Even the Christmas tree lights seemed to dim for dramatic effect. Jason still stood frozen beside Sarah, mouth slightly open, eyes locked on the scene like he was watching a slow-motion car crash. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. And somewhere in that moment, something inside Sarah quietly shattered. Judith muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear, Kids today are too full of themselves, as if she hadn't just emotionally body-slammed an 8-year-old. No apology, no hesitation, no shame. Only that familiar, superior squint. That was it. The point of no return. "We're leaving," Sarah said. Her voice didn't shake, didn't rise, didn't waver. It was cold, flat, final. Tessa grabbed Molly's hand immediately, holding it with a fierceness that made Sarah's chest ache. Molly clung to her, head bowed, shoulders trembling just enough to see. They took their coats in total silence. No one tried to stop them. No one tried to explain. No one offered comfort. They just sat there, mannequins in festive sweaters, eyes darting, guilt simmering, mouths sealed. And maybe that was the worst part. Not just what Judith did, but that an entire room of adults watched a child get crushed and decided to do nothing. They stepped out onto the porch. The winter air hit Sarah's skin, sharp and clean, like a slap back into reality. Behind them, the house glowed warm and golden, a pretty little snow globe full of things pretending not to be broken. She closed the door slowly, deliberately, like sealing off a crime scene. As the latch clicked into place, one truth settled deep in her bones. This wasn't random. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the moment everything finally snapped open. And something told her the real explosion was still coming. If someone had asked Sarah 5 years earlier whether Judith would ever tear up one of her daughter's certificates, she probably would have laughed and said something naive like, "No way, she's just a little intense." Yeah, apparently, intense had just been the warm-up act. What happened on Christmas wasn't random. It was the grand finale of a routine Judith had been perfecting for years, a routine Sarah had kept trying not to see. Let her rewind. When Sarah first met Jason, she noticed 2 things about him. He was kind in a way that felt rare, and he apologized for things that didn't require apologies. Stepping too close to a lamp, breathing in the same space as his mother, existing too loudly in any way. She should have connected the dots sooner. The first real red flag had shown up long before kids were even in the picture. Sarah once mentioned finishing at the top of her college class, and Judith's reaction had been so flat you could have used it as a level. "Oh," Judith said. "One of those high-achieving types." Not cruel, not overtly sarcastic, just judgment wrapped in polite tone, like academic success was some kind of moral defect. At the time, Sarah shrugged it off. People were allowed weird opinions. Then Riley was born, and suddenly Judith became a one-woman parade float of pride and praise. Anything Riley touched turned into a miracle. A shaky crayon drawing? Artistic! A half-completed worksheet? Brilliant effort! A participation ribbon? You should all be so jealous! Riley wasn't a bad kid. Sarah would have told anyone that. The girl was sweet in her own way, just not particularly academic. School wasn't her strongest arena, and that was fine. Not every child needed to be a spelling champion. But Riley was Judith's everything. The perfect little princess who, in Judith's mind, needed constant protection from anything that might make her feel second best. Then Molly came along. Molly, who genuinely loved learning. Molly, who read books for fun. Molly, whose brain seemed wired with its own internal filing system. Molly, who brought home real achievements, spelling certificates, reading awards, little notes from teachers that said, "She's doing so well." And every time Molly succeeded, Judith's face did that strange little twitch, tight smile, stiff nod, rapid subject change. Almost like she just couldn't digest the idea that someone other than Riley had done something impressive. Meanwhile, when Riley brought anything to show, anything at all, Judith reacted like someone had handed her a Nobel Prize. At first, Sarah tried to explain it away. "Oh, she's just excited to be a grandma. Oh, she just expresses herself differently. Oh, maybe she's tired." But Tessa, quiet, watchful Tessa, saw right through it. Grandma only likes when we show her stuff if it's small, she told Sarah once. If it's something good, she gets weird. Sarah remembered staring at her, wanting to argue, and knowing she couldn't. Then came the moment when all those half-formed suspicions snapped together. A few months before Christmas, Molly had won a class award. Not some huge national competition, just a real, earned accomplishment. She brought it to show Judith during a visit. Judith glanced at it, forced a tight smile, and later pulled Sarah aside. "You should tell her not to go around flaunting these things," Judith said. "It can hurt other kids' feelings." Sarah blinked. "What other kids?" Judith's eyes flicked directly to Riley, then back. "I mean any child who doesn't have it as easy as she does," she snapped, suddenly irritated. And there it was. The truth Judith had been dancing around. Judith interpreted Molly's achievements as attacks on Riley. Not bragging, not arrogance, not normal childhood pride. Just existing. Just being good at something. Just accidentally outshining Riley. From that point on, everything clicked into place. When Riley had a small moment and Molly had a bigger one, Judith went cold. When Molly brought home something impressive, Judith dismissed it as showing off. When Riley did something minor, Judith reacted like she'd just secured a full scholarship to Harvard. It wasn't about humility. It wasn't about values. It was about hierarchy. And Molly was climbing too high for Judith's comfort. Tessa saw every bit of it. Long before Molly even understood what was happening, Tessa had already stopped bringing Judith her own school achievements. "She doesn't like it," Tessa said once. "She's nicer when I pretend I didn't do anything." That single sentence cracked something in Sarah. And then, there was the money. Jason had been helping Judith and Amanda financially for years. Quietly. Regularly. With a heavy load of guilt. It started as a temporary loan. Then a bill here, a repair there, and eventually turned into steady monthly transfers Judith treated like a salary she'd earned by simply existing. Whenever Sarah questioned it, Jason folded inward. "She raised us," he would say. "She struggled. She needs help." Maybe she did. But it didn't take long for Sarah to notice that Judith talked about compassion like it was a one-way street that ended at her front door. And the steadier Sarah and Jason's home became, the more Judith looked at Molly's accomplishments not as something to be proud of, but something to resent. She wasn't defending Riley's feelings. She was protecting her own fantasy. Riley on top, always. Molly beneath her, always. So when Molly stepped forward on Christmas, thrilled, hopeful, proud, Judith hadn't seen a child trying to share a special moment. She saw a threat. And when Judith felt threatened, she did what she always did. She cut the problem down to size. Christmas had just been the moment she stopped hiding it. Because the truth was, they had been standing on a landmine for years. Judith had finally stomped on it hard enough to set it off. And none of them had any idea how much bigger that explosion was going to get. By the time they got home from what Sarah had mentally renamed Judith's Christmas circus, she thought she was done feeling anything. She was wrong. Molly went straight to the couch without a word, still holding the torn pieces of her spelling bee certificate like fragments of her heart. Tessa sat down right beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, staring at the floor. She looked like a bodyguard who had just realized the person she was guarding needed protection from their own family. "I'll put on a movie," Sarah heard herself say, her brain switching into emergency mom mode. "Something cozy, okay?" Molly nodded without looking up. Tessa shot Sarah a brief, tight look that said, "I see all of this, and I'm trying not to cry in front of her." Sarah turned on some animated movie none of them were really going to watch, then walked into the kitchen on legs that felt like they'd been installed by a discount mechanic. Her hands shook as she reached for the cocoa mix. It wasn't just nerves. It was rage. Thick, hot, crawling up her spine. She poured milk into a pot. The second the stove ticked on, she felt Jason step into the doorway behind her. "Sarah," he started. That was the spark. She tore up her spelling bee certificate, Sarah snapped, whipping around to face him. In front of everyone, she humiliated her. Her voice came out sharper than she intended, but she didn't care. Someone had to say the words out loud. Someone had to pull this out of the, "Oh, that's just Judith being Judith" drawer and actually look at it. Jason flinched like she'd thrown something. "I know," he said softly. His face was pale, eyes glassy. "I know. I just—" "You just what?" Sarah demanded. "You just stood there. You watched her tear it up like it was trash. Molly looked at you. I looked at you. And you did nothing." His shoulders sagged. He dropped into a chair at the kitchen table like his knees had given out. "I froze," he whispered. "Like I always froze." The worst part was, he wasn't exaggerating. He set his elbows on the table and rubbed his hands over his face. When he finally looked back up, something in his eyes had cracked wide open. "She used to do the same to me," he said. Sarah leaned back against the counter, the spoon in her hand forgotten, cocoa bubbling too fast on the stove. "What do you mean?" she asked. She had a sick feeling she already knew, but she needed him to say it, needed him to hear himself say it. He gave a bitter half laugh. "You know how she's always telling everyone I was so smart growing up?" he said. "Funny how she leaves out how much she hated it." He kept talking, fast now, as if someone had turned a valve. "Anytime I used a big word, she'd say, 'Don't try to sound smarter than people.' If I got a good grade, she'd say, 'Stop bragging. You'll make your sister feel bad.' Once I brought home a little academic award. She rolled her eyes and told me to put it away before company came so I didn't show off." Sarah's throat tightened. "I thought it was discipline," Jason went on. "I thought she was keeping me grounded. I spent my whole childhood convinced I was the problem for being proud of myself." He stared down at his hands. "But tonight, when she did it to Molly, it was like watching my own childhood replay. Except this time it wasn't me. It was my kid." Something in his expression shifted. The guilt was still there, but it had teeth now. He stood up so suddenly his chair jolted backward. "I'm done," he said. "I'm not letting her do this again. Not to them." Before Sarah could ask what "done" meant, he was already moving. Out of the kitchen, down the hall, into the small office they mostly used for taxes and once-a-month money panic. Sarah turned off the stove and followed. By the time she reached the doorway, Jason was already at his desk, laptop open, fingers flying. On the screen, his bank account, rows of transactions, a familiar name, showing up over and over. Transfers to Judith, payments to cover emergencies, money sent to help Amanda just until things settle. All the times he'd said, "She just needs a little help right now." All the times Sarah had let it slide because she didn't want to be the bad guy. "I've been paying her to treat our kids like they're beneath her," he said quietly. He clicked on a recurring payment labeled something like Mom Utilities. Cancel. Confirm. Another. Mom Credit Card. Cancel. Confirm. "Jason," Sarah whispered, her heart doing cartwheels. "Are you sure you want to do this right now?" He didn't even look up. "I should have done it a long time ago," he said. "If she thinks she owns me because I help her, she's wrong. I'm not paying her to hurt our kid." Click, click, click. Each confirmation felt like cutting a cord Sarah hadn't realized was wrapped around all their necks. She didn't stop him. She didn't even try. And then it happened. His phone buzzed on the desk, screen lighting up with a name that made Sarah's stomach flip. Judith. He stared at it for a heartbeat, then picked it up and hit speaker. "What did you do?" Judith shrieked. No hello, no preamble. "My card just got declined at the store. Are you trying to embarrass me?" "I stopped paying your bills," Jason said calmly. You could almost hear the air being sucked in on the other end. "What do you mean you stopped?" she demanded. "You can't just stop." After everything I've done for you, you're really going to do this to your own mother because your precious little girl got her feelings hurt? Sarah pressed her lips together so hard they hurt. She was proud, Jason said. You tore up something she worked for. In front of everyone. You embarrassed her. She needed a lesson, Judith snapped. She struts around like she's better than Riley, and she is not. Somebody has to keep her in check. Sarah's stomach lurched. There it was. Out loud. No more pretending. Jason's jaw clenched. When he spoke, his voice was low, deadly calm. You don't get to hurt my daughter to protect someone else's feelings. You're letting Sarah turn you against your own blood, Judith screamed. You're choosing them over me! He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just ended the call. He hung up. On his mother. If Sarah hadn't watched it with her own eyes, she might not have believed it. She barely had time to exhale before the phone buzzed again. Jason looked at the screen. Amanda, he said, already sounding exhausted. He answered and set the phone back on the desk. What did you do to Mom? Amanda snapped. She's crying. You cut her off? Over what? Because Molly couldn't handle being told no? She wasn't told no, Jason said. Mom tore up her certificate. She humiliated her. Oh, please, Amanda groaned. It's not that serious. Your kid embarrasses Riley all the time with that trophy stuff. She needed to learn she's not the star of this family. Sarah felt her heart stutter. She heard her own voice come out in a whisper. Did she just say that? Jason's hand curled into a fist. So you admit it, he said. You think Molly should shrink so your kid doesn't feel insecure. Well, yeah, Amanda shot back. It's not fair when she acts like she's better than everybody. You let her show off and then Mom gets blamed for trying to keep some balance. There it was. No disguises, no sugarcoating, just raw, ugly truth. Jason's voice shook, but he didn't back down. If you talk about my daughter like that again, he said, we're done. You're throwing away your family, Amanda screamed. I'm protecting mine, he said, and he hung up. Again. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the two of them breathing like they'd just run a marathon through fire. Down the hall, the movie hummed quietly. Laughter drifted from the TV. Molly didn't laugh. Tessa stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. She had heard enough. Anyone could see it in her eyes. Are we ever going back there? She asked softly. Jason looked at her. Really looked. For the first time in years, he saw her instead of whatever version of reality Judith wanted him to see. No, he said. Not after this. Tessa nodded once, like a verdict had been delivered. Molly appeared behind her, eyes puffy, clutching the taped-together scraps of her certificate. Why doesn't Grandma like when I do good things? She asked. That one sentence hurt worse than anything Judith had said all night. Sarah dropped to a crouch in front of her. Baby, she said, some people feel small inside, and instead of fixing that, they hurt people who shine. That's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You're allowed to be proud of yourself. Jason knelt beside them, tears finally spilling over. He pulled both girls into his arms like they were his only life raft. No one is ever going to tear up your achievements again, he said. Not while I'm here. I promise. And for the first time that day, Sarah believed him. What she didn't know yet was that the ripple from those 2 phone calls was about to hit Judith harder than Judith ever imagined. If Sarah had thought the Christmas meltdown and those 2 nuclear phone calls were the end of it, she was adorably naive. Like, believes the dryer eats socks, naive. Judith wasn't done. Of course she wasn't done. Women like Judith didn't lick their wounds. They held press conferences. 2 days after Jason cut her off, Sarah woke up to 9 messages from relatives she barely spoke to. Have you seen what your MIL posted? You okay? Um, wow. Nothing good ever started with, "Have you seen what she posted?" Sarah opened Facebook, and there Judith was. She had written a full-blown manifesto, long enough to count as a college application essay, posed beside her Christmas tree like the patron saint of suffering mothers. According to Judith, Sarah was raising arrogant children who think trophies make them better than family. Molly had shoved her certificate in everyone's faces. And the best part, Judith had gently corrected her, which had caused an explosive overreaction orchestrated by Sarah. Sarah actually snorted. Molly couldn't shove anything in anyone's face if you paid her in unicorn stickers. There was no mention of tearing, no mention of the trash can, no mention of the fact that the gentle correction had been a total humiliation. And then Amanda entered the battlefield. She commented under the post like Judith's personal hype squad. Molly always acts superior. Some kids need to be humbled. Mom was just teaching her manners. Sarah almost dropped her phone. Some kids need to be humbled? She had to physically restrain herself from typing. Yes, and some adults need court dates. Then, because apparently Amanda was fully committed to the bit, she added another comment implying that Riley had been bullied by the constant showing off. Bullied. By an 8-year-old holding a certificate. Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, dizzy with rage, disbelief, and that awful second-hand embarrassment that comes when someone humiliates themselves publicly with supreme confidence. Jason walked in, hair still a mess from sleep. "You saw it?" he asked. "Oh, I saw it," Sarah said. "I also saw Amanda auditioning for Worst Human of 2024. He took her phone and read in silence. His jaw tightened. His eyes hardened. Then he handed the phone back like it was contaminated. "We're responding," he said. Sarah's stomach flipped. Fear? Adrenaline? Both. "Are you sure?" she asked. "They're already making fools of themselves." "They're lying about our kid," he said. "We're done letting them control the narrative." She nodded. He was right. She hated that he was right, but he was. They sat together on the couch, the same one where Molly had cried 2 nights earlier, and typed out a post. It was short, calm, factual, the exact opposite of Judith's essay-length tantrum. 2 days ago, Jason wrote, Molly showed her grandmother a spelling bee certificate she was proud of. Her grandmother tore it into pieces and threw it in the trash. This wasn't the first time she dismissed or mocked our children's achievements. We're choosing to step back from that side of the family. They attached a photo of Molly's certificate taped back together, screenshots of Judith's texts. "Knock her down a peg. Don't let her steal attention from Riley. She needs to stay humble for everyone's sake." No dramatic commentary, no accusations of crimes. They just let the truth sit there. And the truth? It's loud. Comments flooded in like someone had opened a gate. "Wait, she tore it up? Who does that to a child?" I thought Molly was bragging. I feel awful now. This is so toxic. Someone Sarah didn't even know wrote, "I'm sorry. My grandfather did something similar. It sticks with you." Then came the comment that changed everything. "She did the same to me when I won an award in high school. I never forgot it." It was one of Jason's cousins, someone who had always stayed neutral. Suddenly, the entire comment section flipped. People deleted their earlier support for Judith. Someone asked Amanda if she was proud of defending a grown woman who tore up a child's certificate. Amanda did not reply. She didn't post again for the rest of the day. Judith went silent too, which was honestly more unsettling than her yelling. It was the quiet before a storm, or a lawsuit, or Judith showing up at their front door with a megaphone. But instead, the phone rang. Not Judith. Not Amanda. Gordon. Jason's uncle. The one who barely spoke, rarely visited, and had the emotional presence of a stone statue in a bank lobby. If he called, something was happening. Jason answered on speaker. "I saw the posts," Gordon said. His voice was calm and steady, unsettlingly so. And I talked to several people. Oh, Jason said, eyes widening. Okay. This has gone on long enough, Gordon continued. Your mother has been taking money from all of us for years. Sarah's jaw dropped. All of us? Excuse me? Gordon didn't pause. She's not getting another dollar, he said. Not from me. Not from you. Not from anyone she's been leaning on. Before they could process that, he dropped the real bomb. I already moved the money I was sending her every month into 2 education funds, one for Molly, one for Tessa. Sarah's mouth went dry. They'll each have a solid start for college, he said, or whatever programs they want. It's done. Sarah had to sit down. Her legs weren't prepared for surprise philanthropist Uncle Energy, even if he wasn't technically a billionaire. Gordon, Jason breathed. That's a lot. That's called accountability, Gordon said. I'd rather invest in kids who work hard than someone who tears up their achievements. And just like that, he hung up. Jason and Sarah stared at each other, stunned into silence. Then Jason exhaled, sounding like he'd been holding his breath for a decade. Of course Judith found out. Of course she did. She started calling everyone in the family, shrieking that Sarah had stolen her future, that Jason had abandoned his own mother, that Gordon had lost his mind. This time, nobody defended her. Not one person. Amanda deactivated her Facebook account. Leonard reportedly told someone he was too old for this nonsense. And Judith? She went quiet again. Not peaceful quiet. Storm brewing quiet. But honestly, Sarah didn't care anymore. Because that night, Molly hung a new certificate on her bedroom wall, untorn, not taped back together, not waiting for approval that was never going to come. Tessa hugged her and said, "See, this is how it's supposed to be." Jason stood in the doorway, eyes glassy but proud. Sarah watched them and felt something new settle in her chest. Not victory, not exactly relief. Something steadier. A line, finally drawn. A door, finally shut. A cycle, finally broken. Judith had tried to make Molly smaller. All she'd really done was show them how tall they could stand. So what do you think? Did they go too far or not far enough? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for more.